I am so pleased to be chairing this session. It's, I think, a session that we've, in a sense, touched on, or some of the concerns in this session we've touched on already quite a lot today. But this is a session on quality and success for Indigenous students. And I'm really pleased to introduce Dr. Leanne Holt from Macquarie University and Sadie Heckenberg from the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Postgraduate Association, who are going to speak today. And in defiance of the ordering of things, Leanne is going to go first. Yes, off you go. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you.
Can I have my mic back up for a minute? We were talking about this just earlier. Today is a really interesting and historic day for many reasons in Australia's various parliaments. There's a very important thing happening in 5 minutes, which is Lydia Thorpe, who is the first Indigenous woman elected to the Victorian Parliament, will give her maiden speech. I hate that phrase, but anyway, will give her first speech. So I think this is a really, really, really significant day, both in Victoria and nationally, in a legislative sense and a parliamentary sense. So I just want to give Lydia a clap as well.
Nira Yigu Warama Burpai, Marakia Marala Burga, Yi Wurundjeri Bure. Since 2010, there has been an increase in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander student enrolments in higher education based on effective full-time student load from 7,370 to 10,621 in 2015, or just over 17,500 headcount in 2016. However, access is different to success, and so to achieve Indigenous student success, institutions must adopt holistic yet layered approaches. This is currently being coined as a whole-of-university approach. However, to suit today's audience, I'm going to coin it a whole-of-institution approach. Sorry, I have some slides. We know that high-level student experience is about the holistic culture of an institution and not just a focus on student-based programs or services offered by student services. So although it is important to recognise that there isn't one single model that will fit every institution, as institutions attempt to conceptualise and deliver what a whole-of-institution structure might look like, it has become clear that there are some key aspects that are important to achieving success. The availability of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander spaces, appropriate student and community engagement, including Indigenous knowledges and perspectives in learning and teaching and as well as in research, ensuring culturally safe and responsive environments, increased Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander workforce represented across all areas of the university, Indigenous higher education and participation included in strategy, governance and leadership, and adequate investment and resourcing that is conducive to the commitments made by institutions in achieving Indigenous success. Importantly, a whole-of-institution approach needs to be based on a model that includes Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander participation at all levels of the institution. Obviously, student and community engagement is key to increasing access, participation and success of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students in educational institutions. The major component of this for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students is ensuring that students feel a sense of belonging. Many Aboriginal students suffer from what has been called the imposter syndrome. That is, believing that one day while they are sitting in a lecture, someone is going to tap them on the shoulder and tell them there's been a mistake and they need to leave. This is based on a range of circumstances. Some of them may include accessing university through alternative entry pathways, being first in family, historical impacts that indicated Aboriginal people did not belong in Western educational institutions, continued racism experienced within higher education institutions, and stereotyping, such as Indigenous students automatically require a high level of academic support when they enter our institutions. Institutions must need to take the next step in extending beyond the notion of the traditional student support emphasis for Aboriginal students. This has over time created a perception that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students that access university automatically require a high level of student support. This stigma, in turn, discourages many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students from connecting with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander spaces within institutions. The language of student and community engagement more readily reflects the actual needs of students, which is to engage with institutions and with individuals and communities that draw on common values, experiences, perspectives and knowledges. This is inclusive of academic engagement, but also extends to cultural, emotional and social engagement. Ongoing accessibility of scholarships that provide opportunity for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students that result in successful student experience is imperative. Eligibility criteria of scholarships should respond to the experiences and needs of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students and not just duplicate non-Aboriginal criteria. Providing a culturally affirming and intellectually engaging environment within an institution is crucial to Indigenous students' success. A high number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students are first in family, like we heard in the last one with rural students, and find a university environment daunting. Students identify that a major contribution to their success is their relationship with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander spaces, having what they would explain as a home away from home, or feeling like they were part of a community where the knowledges and experiences they bring to their educational journey are respected and cultivated. This should be felt across the whole of the institution. Cultural safety is paramount in the attraction and success of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students and staff. Institutions have a responsibility to provide a culturally safe environment for all students, staff, and wider institution community. A zero tolerance to racism should be adopted and enforced to provide an effective learning environment for the benefit of all staff, students, and community. Aboriginal student connection to community, country, and culture is reinforced by the different priorities Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students link with choosing tertiary studies. Feedback from Aboriginal students indicates a strong desire once they graduate to give back and contribute to their communities as a priority over obtaining a good job as a means to earning high income for asset investment. It is important for institutions to understand what this means to an Indigenous student experience. Community engagement and elders in residence, cultural advisor type programs contribute to mentorship and guidance to allow students to maintain connections and engage in dialogue that contributes to their personal, cultural, professional and academic growth. There is a continued underrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander postgraduate and research students. Postgraduate students contribute to Aboriginal professional leadership and potentially academic workforce. Ensuring that postgraduate students are provided with opportunities conducive to successful student experience should be an integral part of a university student engagement strategy, irrelevant of the funding source. Developing processes that identify students at an undergraduate level for postgraduate opportunities is key to increasing postgraduate enrolments. Also, ensuring that the provision of appropriate supervision and mentoring of HDR students are also strategies that require attention from the research development officers and integrated within university policies and practices. Aboriginal representation on relevant postgraduate research and ethics committees is also vital for progressing this important area. Learning and teaching through curriculum as well as Indigenous research should represent Indigenous knowledges, cultures, histories and worldviews. Student graduate capabilities need to include having an understanding and appreciation of Aboriginal knowledges, perspectives and histories, as well as the necessary skills and attributes to work with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and communities. This in turn is reflective of the value-based expectations of educational institutions from their internal communities and contributes to the goal of institutions to graduate globally responsive citizens. Aboriginal staff should be represented across all areas and all levels of the university to create an environment where Aboriginal voices and perspectives are a part of the fabric of the university, contributing to the day-to-day visions of the institution. Strategies, plans, policies and programs need to incorporate commitments to the advancement of Indigenous higher education. Accountability and responsibility must move beyond being driven from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and instead be driven by a good institutional governance, leadership and accountability model. Aboriginal people across the Academy, primarily from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander centres, have for the past 4 decades driven Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander higher education outcomes. The future structure needs to value the contribution and expertise from Aboriginal scholars and leaders. However, through respectful and reciprocal relationships with senior leaders in governments and educational institutions, share the responsibility and accountability. The Universities Australia strategy, launched earlier this year, is leading this agenda. Developed in collaboration with the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Higher Education Consortium, it provides a blueprint forward for universities and is definitely a valuable resource for other educational institutions to take a look at. The current challenge is that we rely on goodwill of educational institutions and their communities to adopt quality practices and processes. However, the Barrett report in 2012 and also a recent report developed by NATSIHEC is calling for a TEXA-like provision of a quality evaluation and assessment framework that formally drives quality approaches and accountability towards progress that is conducive to not just Aboriginal students and staff, but all of the university community and society as a whole. And I'm now going to hand it over to Sadie, and she's going to back up all of my comments with some student examples and perspectives. Thanks, Sadie.
Thank you so much. Just open my little computer here. Wonderful. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people on whose land we stand and learn today. And I would like to thank Uncle Bill and pay my respects to his teaching today and to my elders from the Wurundjeri Nation who without I would not be here and have a voice. So I'm actually going to take a little bit of inspiration from the panel before me, and I'm actually going to explain a little bit from where I sit as a student. So I've had a really interesting, those of you who've listened to me before, I've had a really interesting university experience. I came through as a pathways student, so I know just how important it is to have a pathways. And I attended my undergraduate and my honours at a group of 8 regional campus. I then started my PhD, and my supervisor happened to leave that university. So I followed him to a university in South Australia. My supervisor then left that university. So I followed him to Swinburne University, which is where I am now. So I've had a little bit of experience in terms of what different universities, how different universities react and what different universities do. And I can also write you a very good research proposal because I've had to apply for my PhD a few times. The other thing is that I really do come from a very privileged position of being able to do quite an extensive amount of overseas research. And that has really allowed me to not only know where I sit as a researcher and as a student, but also what we can see and how we can improve in Australia. Having been an Indigenous postgraduate student in Hawaii, I now know what we need to do for me to get that same voice, that same recognition as an Indigenous postgraduate student in Australia. And that really is prioritising our voices as individuals and as students and prioritising our indigeneity. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, like all students studying in Australia, come from a wide range of experiences, backgrounds and knowledge of higher education systems. We have not only had access to universities, we have only had access to universities from the mid-last century, and we are still working hard to gain parity and create the right balance for our institutions. Australian institutions have, as Leanne was saying, 17,815 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, which I was incredibly pleased to see because that's 2,000 more than the year before's statistics. So we're rising. Students that I represent as the president of NATSIHEC are 2,660 students. So that's a 1,000 student increase from the year before. That is just over 2,500 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander postgraduate students. And they're who we need to foster for our new generation of academics, of researchers, and of leaders in society. But how do we keep the retention? How do we keep our students at university and feeling positive about that university experience? Well, firstly, I feel as an Aboriginal student, we really need to recognise and prioritise the importance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander centres, colleges and schools. These places of support and learning are not only a physical representation on campus of the university's commitment to Indigenous staff, students and the broader community, but is an obvious safe place in which students can find comfort and understanding in what can be an alienating environment. These centres of cultural understanding offer both academic support, friendly access to Indigenous university academics, and I can tell you from experience that I'll get a phone call from downstairs and they'll be like, Sadie, come and help me in the computer lab. And I go, because what I would, and other students to share experiences with, and the odd packet of 2-minute noodles. But more than this, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander centres offer something that is hard to find outside in the broader university, catering to many thousands of students. So it's hard in the broader university to do this, and that is pastoral care. Myself as a student and as a university academic know there is almost nothing more important than getting the right pastoral care. One of the key memories of my undergraduate studies was when I was struggling. I was at a really bad point in both my mental health and my studies when I was finishing my undergraduate and starting my honours. And my Aboriginal liaison officer, she really took great care of her students, and she rang me up and she wanted to know what was wrong. She then drove the 2 hours to the regional campus that I was at, and she stayed for a few days and made sure I was okay. Now, this is an extreme example of something that we don't really have that many resources to do in universities and the higher education sector. However, this is what we tend to actually do on a day-to-day basis in Aboriginal centres and colleges. We know our students really well and we take care of them. And this is what I have taken into my day-to-day approach. I have students that are from a pathways. So I'm the program coordinator for Indigenous Pathways program at USQ. And one of the main parts of my position is pastoral care and understanding where my students are coming from. We have Indigenous students who are coming into university from all different walks of life and through different pathways. I myself, as I said before, was a pathways student. This is becoming a larger part of student life for many of our students, whether they're Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander or whether they're from a different cultural background. This is becoming, thousands of students go through an alternative entry into university each year, and students come from the city, they come from the region the university's at, and they come from remote towns. Students can be computer literate, or I've had students that have learnt on slate and chalk. Students can have NBN, or students can be getting their internet access from the data on their phone, and once that runs out, they can't study anymore that month, unless they go to the local library, which we've had to set up programs with because the local libraries charge $10 an hour sometimes. We are diverse. For the majority of my PhD, I was in a competition, not really, but I was in a competition with my mother because she was completing hers as well. And so we were both arguing about who was going to finish first. Well, she finished well before me. I submit at the end of the year. But it was a very proud moment, but it was also really showed just how different we come into our programs and how different students we are. We also need to take into consideration that university is expensive. We were talking earlier about the cost of university and whether or not the HEC structure is right for our future. But as we hear from students more today, we realise we need to put into focus the day-to-day costs of attending university. One of my students this year was 17 years old and living alone. Now, if you are an 18-year-old and you are undertaking university and you live with your parents, you get just under $300 a fortnight. And if you live by yourself, you get just over $400. And we all know that's incredibly hard to live on, even in a rural location. With Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students traditionally coming from low socioeconomic backgrounds, they, like many other students, might not be family support. That might be the only income our students have. It is important to remember that all students across the country are actually doing something amazing. So this student, and he wasn't one of my completions, and I'm going to make sure that he is in the future, was doing something amazing. He was 17 years old, he was living by himself, and he thought, I'm going to try to go to university. And isn't that really inspiring? And I've got other students like that, one of my other students is so bright, and he constantly thinks that he's stupid. And I've spent a year building up his self-confidence, but this is a kid who goes into a shop and has to put his hands in his pockets because they automatically think he's going to steal something. So we have to constantly foster that our students are actually special people, and they are amazing people. We are sacrificing our standard of living, our ability to experience the world, because now if you're on Centrelink, you can't even go on a holiday outside of the country without getting cut off, even during the holiday periods. Our free time, all for the love of learning, a passion for knowledge, and the chance to have your dream career. We also need to think about integrating Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives across the university curriculum, as Leanne was saying. This is incredibly important for fostering not only creating a respectful, community-orientated graduate, but this also creates a wider range of safe learning environments for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. So I'm going to give you a little look into my undergraduate studies, but when I was in my undergraduate, my major in Indigenous Studies required me to undertake a course that was also a core component of a nursing degree. Now, those are very, very large classrooms, as you know, and those students in particular didn't want to do that subject. They kept arguing how they would never meet an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person, and they even actually got together and created a petition so they wouldn't have to do the subject. Of course, the university didn't listen to them. The university said, no, you need to, this is important. But the thing is that we really need to have a ground-up approach. Forcing a second or third year course or subject into a major without first having a general subject in students' first year creates this disconnect. And it means that we as Aboriginal students go into a hostile learning environment even from our colleagues. And I used to have people talk about the subject in front of me because they didn't realise my cultural background. And it was very, very hard. We also deserve more than just 1 week of curriculum in a subject. It is important when we indigenise curriculum that we do it properly, because 2-hour lecture it does not make a respectful process. This in turn should flow up through undergraduate degrees to postgraduate studies. It is very hard as an Aboriginal postgraduate student to struggle to find an Indigenous supervisor or lecturer if you're in coursework. This is not to say the expertise is not there, but it can be hard to justify to the university how cultural experience and community research knowledge is more highly sought after than how many research grants they've gotten or how many students they have gotten through a PhD. And I think that that's a really important message. It's a struggle. My supervisors are beautiful, beautiful people, but it's a struggle to have supervisors who don't come from the same cultural background as I have and only know about me from learning from a book. And it can be a struggle for many, many students, and I've talked to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander postgraduate students over and over again who struggle with that environment. These then feed into retention and completion because we're creating an environment where you feel safe and that you love to learn in. Though there are a number of Indigenous students are increasing, we still need to make sure institutional environments are welcoming places. Thank you.
Thanks, Sadie, and thanks, Leanne. Can we have the questions up? Thank you. Here we go. Sadie, we need more ATSI students, leaders on campus. How do we encourage this?
This is a very, very good question, actually. I was just talking to students from UNSW, And we were talking about the fact that because my student cohort is quite small, it's very, very hard to tap into those student voices. And so I struggle at a national level with student representation and having other office bearers. I think that we need to really talk to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander centres. It's really important because that's actually where us as students hang out. That's our safe place on campus. And I think it's also creating that we don't want to necessarily be the token, yeah? So it's creating the fact that our voice is just as important as yours on a daily basis. And I find that there are quite a number of positions that are more equity officer or, you know, either an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person or an equity you know, you need to actually have that dedicated voice, and you need to encourage and foster it. And if that's an 18-year-old that's really outspoken, because one of my students is, if that's an 18-year-old that's really outspoken, you foster that student until they actually have that knowledge of how to talk at a university basis, and you grab them young and you take them with you and you really teach them that, you know, how to raise their voice. That's just as important as somebody who's my age.
I was struck by, in your talk, and in fact in both your talks, this idea that we need to embed these, you know, tolerances and embrace at every level of the university a notion of not just Indigenous content but participation. And I'm struck by some other examples, like you used your lived experience of going to Hawaii, where there has been that kind of cultural shift or change happen. So the immediate and obvious one to me, partly because I'm from Melbourne, is the AFL. And the ways in which the AFL tackled Indigenous participation from the grassroots up. And it did that with a really interesting, not just peer-based model, but a leadership-driven model. So you have, for example, the coaches of teams taking new Indigenous players into their home to live with them for 2 or 3 years until they establish themselves in their own communities in often remote places from where they grew up. And it strikes me that universities don't necessarily do that, that the burden is often at the peer level, not at the leadership level. What would happen if vice-chancellors became the peers, right? How symbolic would that be to have vice-chancellors offering to mentor new students and engage with them at that level? I think it would be really interesting.
That'd be amazing.
So, that was a rhetorical question because we all agree. Leanne, there's a question for you, which is about the National Centre for Cultural Competency. How might that fit into helping institutions become culturally safe places for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? And should the institutions pay for that help?
Yeah, okay. I can't talk much about the National Centre for Cultural Competency. I know it's there. I know it was developed, and I know that there's that it holds a conference. But apart from that, I still sort of feel that it's trying to find its space as well and place. And so, but I think institutions, should they pay for help? Yeah, definitely they should pay for help the same as they pay for any other expertise. But I think it is about, and I said that there's no one fit for any institution. So I think it is about the university's investment in developing a strategy that fits in with the wider plans and frameworks of the university, and then making that investment to be able to get the expertise, but also to be able to bring the resources that is necessary into the university to implementing. Too much of our space happens on an ad hoc basis. There needs to be more planning and more visions that actually create sustainability, and so that, again, you're not just reacting to the goodwill of an academic, putting content into a course that once that academic goes, then the content goes as well. But also, but that is actually embedded into doing external program reviews, that every time there's an external program review, that Indigenous content is reviewed for either development or quality assurance. So I guess it's about making sure that things are embedded into university systems and processes and not just done here and there at an ad hoc level. Yeah.
So I think this one might be for you. How do we get more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as student representatives outside of just being a sort of token Indigenous officer and into roles like president, or embed them properly and fully in a participative way?
It's just like the last question. It's actually a really, really interesting question, and I think it does come down to the fact that we do need to actually have that genuine conversations on a day-to-day basis with those particular students. We only tend to go to Indigenous centres or to, other areas where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students are along most of the time when there's an event happening, or when it's, NAIDOC week, and I think that that's the thing, because a lot of the time, so I started out on the Monash Postgraduate Association, and it was a really, really lovely organisation. But the thing is that I think I'd been the only Indigenous office bearer for years. So you're the only Aboriginal person in that room. And like Leanne would probably find a lot of the time in other in higher up consultations, when you're the only representative of that people in the room, your voice kind of tends to get a bit stifled, and you've kind of got to have arguments with people. And that doesn't mean to say that people aren't really appreciative of your knowledge. It just means that people don't automatically think of the issues because it's not something they have a personal experience of. And so I think that's the thing, is I think you've got to actually have that interaction a bit more, encourage those students a little bit more. I think the other thing is that this is a kind of a different question for undergraduates as it is to postgraduates, because a lot of my student cohort is actually is older. And so they've got lives outside of university, and so university a lot of the time is something that they come in once a week for, and they study mostly at home. Where undergraduate students, I think you've really got to get students in the social club, the Indigenous University Games. I find all of my students turn up to university when it's university games. So kind of getting those initiatives going where then you can build up, because it's hard to be the only person in the room, but it's not hard when there's two of you. And so if you can build up those friendships and those links and that genuine understanding, then people realise they're not just a token, and it means you're going to get more of that interaction.
Leanne, a question for you. How would you measure Indigenous participation
I know I asked for this one.
and integration with higher ed providers at a TEXA level?
I did ask for this because I did do that cheeky last paragraph. I think that, again, it's about what I just said. It's about measuring the integration of Aboriginal higher education within the governance and the policy level of the university. So it is about, and before TEXA we had ORCA, and ORCA did when they came into universities, it did assess and look at Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander higher education within universities. So I think it's taking a bit of that history back again, but I do think it is about, again, looking at the integrated governance and looking at the integrated systems that actually support the ongoing progress of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander success across all areas of the university.
I would add to that I think Indigenous cultures in Australia offer models of rethinking metrics, which are really, really interesting. And we could actually do some, I think, quite nice embedding of a changed perspective on what's important and how we achieve those different outcomes. And I think there hasn't been enough of that translation work going on, which would be very, very interesting.
Yeah. What I said was just like a beginning discussion, but I do think that to move towards something like that, there needs to obviously be consultation and a lot of discussion between bodies like TEXA and NATSIHEC and the department as well.
Yes, and then it's a real conversation and not just, here are the metrics, how do we make you achieve them?
Because like Universities Australia now have the strategy, which I discussed, the Indigenous Student Success Program, which is the restrictive funding that comes into universities, have actually outlined some quite clear guidelines within, some quite clear outcomes that they have expectations from universities to meet. And so I think to like even to bring some of those together into a more formal accountability and accreditation framework, or not accreditation, sorry, evaluation framework, is what's needed. Because obviously, again, we're just relying on, yeah, we'd like you to do this, but there's no accountability attached to it, no formal accountabilities attached to anything that's being developed. The most is within the ISSP guidelines, which obviously they're saying that universities won't get funding if they don't meet these guidelines. But then who are the losers from that? The money that the universities are getting is going towards success of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students. So should they take that away from universities? That's definitely not what we want to see. So where can there be accountability that doesn't just sit with to the detriment of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education?
Brilliant question to end on, because we actually went overtime and I was chairing this particular session, so that's bad me. People should know that I was born 2 weeks after my due date and I've been late ever since. So thank you so much, Sadie and Leanne. That was a brilliant session. Thank you.
Thank you.